You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 49, we're gonna go around the league discussing the latest Overwatch League news. Roster apocalypse continues, and no one is safe. Expansion teams are finalized, much to the dismay of the Midwest. I mean, the whole region. I'll talk about that in a bit. And of course, we will take a look back at the Overwatch World Cup Los Angeles group stage, which, you know, was Team USA just crushing it. All that and so much more. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to one of my co-hosts, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us tonight on Twitch for our live show. And of course, thank all of our repeat listeners out there. Of course, as always, I do have someone here with me to help break everything down, and it is none other than Mr. ATL, my soulmate, Slambo. Slambo, how are you doing tonight, brother?
Oh, what's up, nerd? Oh, man, I'm in a good mood right now, Totem, and I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna try to temper that good mood a little bit. All right, I'm gonna try to calm down, and I'm gonna try to be humble. I'm gonna start with a very simple USA. USA, USA. I can already feel that World Cup hype brewing. I'm super sad that I won't be able to witness the USA once again at BlizzCon, in the finals. But it definitely feels like it's World Cup season for Overwatch, and I'm like really happy that's become a thing that I can look forward to now annually. So I'm in a good mood. I'm excited to be back on the show. I'm sorry I wasn't here last week, but we've got plenty to talk about. It seems like I'm sure we've got 3 other roster moves that are happening while I said this sentence. And they're already popping up on Twitter or on the Discords, and we're missing them because we're doing the show. So it's definitely a very fun season. So I'm looking forward to talking about what's happened so far. And I am just looking forward to see what the heck happens over the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't present for the whole roster apocalypse episode where we talked a ton of roster moves. Yeah. But we've actually had quite a bit of movement since then as well. So, we got our spreadsheet, we got it all updated. We'll have it again in the show notes for you guys. And, soon enough, I will be adding all of the, staff for the expansion teams, which we'll be discussing tonight. So that being said, since the last episode, we have had a couple of teams come out announcing their roster changes, which includes the Dallas Fuel, Florida Mayhem, as well as the Los Angeles Valiant. So, that contract negotiation stage, at least for, the players that were on the Season 1 rosters, that has come and gone. At this point, we have moved on to the free agency exclusively for the expansion teams. But we gotta talk about the roster cuts, the reassignments, everything in between. We even have a transfer that dropped, maybe a couple of hours ago before the show. But first up, let's talk about the Dallas Fuel. So as I said, roster apocalypse has continued. And of course, we have some pretty big changes to a couple of teams, and this one kind of caught me by surprise because Dallas has opted not to do a ton of movement. So, the Fuel have actually only released one player from their roster, that being their support player, Chips Hygiene, and he's actually the only release. Coco is getting reassigned. Another one of, the envious OGs. He is taken up an assistant coaching role with the Dallas Fuel. So that means that the Fuel have re-signed 7 players from last year's roster. So that includes AKM, Effect, Harry Hook, Mickey, OGE, Taimu, and Unco. Okay, so I don't know how you're feeling, Slambo, but okay, so stage 4, we got the best looking Dallas Fuel that we have seen.
Exactly.
This is when Arrow was brought on. He was kind of put in pieces in place. And we were in a meta where, Mickey got quite a bit of the limelight because he did take up the Brigitte role. Dallas was running Brigitte more than any other team in the league, and they were looking pretty good. With that being said, though, are you surprised at all by the fact that they kept the majority of their roster intact, given the lack of consistency throughout the season for the field?
So, yes. Short answer, yes. I'm surprised at how much of the roster was maintained. And to your point kind of early on, I'm surprised the individual that was chosen to be chopped, especially now as we move towards a meta currently where all the supports kind of have a little bit more equal footing and he gets a little bit more opportunity to show some of his depth, in the support role. So anyway, both those reasons I'm surprised. Why I'm not surprised is because of what you also said, is that I think that Dallas Fuel is trying to get a little bit of that magic in a bottle. They're trying to capture some of that essence from stage 4 and maintain some of that synergy. But I believe in doing so, I think they're setting themselves up for failure. So I couldn't agree more. I think that it's not the time to be stubborn. There's a really developed Overwatch, contender scene. There's a lot of great talent in Korea. And I think and arguably some of the other regions, there's some individuals. I think this is the time to really shift and move things up to prepare for a new landscape in season 1, the competition, or season 2. The competition is going to be a lot more intense. So I don't know. It's just I just don't think it's going to work. That's my opinion. But at the same time, I mean, good on them for kind of taking a chance, for like sticking to their convictions, to sticking to their principles as a team and saying, for us, the priority is synergy. The priority for us is teamwork and this communication we've developed, and we'll look to just build around that. And so I guess props to them for at least knowing what they are, what they want, and moving forward with it too, because at least they're not being indecisive like a roster we're going to talk about here in a little bit. I don't want to give it away. At this point, like, they're just not making any decisions. But then again, we got a lot of new teams. I know a lot of movement still. So but yeah, overall total, a little bit surprised about some things. At the same time, I see why they made that decision, and I don't think I necessarily agree with it right now.
Yeah, like, this is kind of one that I'm, like, kind of iffy about, because granted, Dallas Fuel had quite a bit of issues throughout the stages, and a lot of that was just due to the fact, with their main tank situation throughout, the first 3 stages. So obviously there was a lot of movement. There were some things that happened. A certain player that you don't like to talk about, which we're going to have to bring up at some point tonight, one way or another, because of Canada. You don't even have to say it. Everyone will just know who you're not talking about. But there were times where we had multiple players that were taking the mantle of that main tank role. And even at one point it was Taimu. But to me, like, when I look at everyone that they kept, there was one name in particular that I was surprised by, and that was the fact that AKM was brought back for Season 2. Now, we had the whole, how long does it take to build an AKM blade meme going on. Dallas Fuel embraced that meme, and I'm glad that they did, but I just feel like AKM, he's one of those players that, is kind of... he's in murky water, because he plays a lot of heroes that aren't technically meta, and we really haven't seen him have an opportunity to play said characters when they are actually good. So I feel like he's just a risk at actually running in these comps, and there were a lot of times during, some of these experimentation with tanks where AKM was basically like one trick in Soldier 76. And this was back when, like, Mickey was, still playing off-tank. Taimu was playing the Winston, because of everything that was going on. And Mickey had the unfortunate duty of choosing whether to protect Taimu, who was inexperienced at that role, or Peelin for AKM, who was on the back line, mostly with Unko, who was on the Mercy. But, like, I feel like AKM was really the biggest question mark, but the one that I'm really happy to see is the fact that Effect is staying with Dallas Fuel. This is a player that had kind of gone through some stuff, mentally in the inaugural season, and, Arrow spoke very highly of Effect, saying, like, we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that, Effect gets the help that he needs, regardless of whether or not he stays with the team. So I'm really glad to see that Effect is being brought back. I hope he's in a better, headspace, and Effect has definitely been the carry of that team, especially at that role specifically, because, with Hitscan and Taimu, there's a lot of times where he's either feeling it, and he's doing great, he gets more aggressive, we see, the flank move coming out more and more, but when he's not feeling it, you need someone there to be, kind of the person to pick up the torch at that point, and Effect has always been the go-to guy for the Dallas Fuel, so I'm really excited to see him back.
Yeah, real quick on Effect. It's funny is I don't mean it in the context purely as like NFL, but he's kind of our first Overwatch League diva, if you will, one of those players that has an extremely intense ability to carry a game, a ton of just raw talent, but also it seems to be a bit mentally unstable and a bit of a sore loser. Again, that's a bit, what we see in the NFL, there's a lot grander scale, there's a lot bigger paychecks on the line. And Effect is, again, not that same type of flamboyant, kind of pouty person. I just mean in comparison to the rest of the league, he has this certain kind of brisk personality when it comes to his performance. And I just feel like he's kind of got that diva personality, but all those things, the reason I'm saying diva is because he's worth it. And the teams that they put up with these crazy players, it's a good example for him to be in Dallas. There was this player called Des Bryant for the Dallas Cowboys, very, kind of like a diva, loud player, maybe caused some issues, maybe was a little too upset after games. But at the same time, he brought so much to the team that they worked around it. They played around it. So it's just, I'm kind of bringing that analogy back to what the Dallas Fuel did here with Effect. And overall, I think for the level of talent you're getting, it might be a good call. But that's one that, Totem, to your point, I hope he's doing well. I don't mean diva in a negative sense. I just mean he's got some issues and he's a standout player and he's worth the issues. And he's really a highlight of that team to watch. And Doomfist is one of my favorite characters to watch. And his Doomfist is just clean and just punishing. So very much the case for me there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I hope for the analyst desk that, they don't pick against, Dallas in some instances where, Effect just gets agitated to the point where he single-handedly just completely takes over the game, like we saw when, the desk picked Shanghai over Dallas, and then Effect just took matters into his own hands, and he's like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm not gonna allow that to happen. So he
has standards, guys.
Yeah.
He has standards.
But that being said, we are going to get an entirely new Shanghai track, and so who knows, maybe they will pull a Cleveland Browns and, just tie the first game after, a winless season. Could happen, you never know.
It could happen, but you know what? No, probably won't happen.
No, it's not going to happen. But anyways, there is another team that, like Shanghai, made some pretty drastic cuts to their roster. That just happens to be the team that was just above Shanghai in the overall stand-ins for the inaugural season, that being the Florida Mayhem. So, Misfits, at least the majority of the Misfits roster, they are gone. So Swoosh, Logix, Manitin, Zappis, Zebusai, and Zupe have all been released from the roster, which leaves only 3 players from their Season 1 roster still intact. So, you have 2 Koreans left. You have Awesome Guy, Saya player, both former Meta Athena players. And then you have the sole survivor of the Misfits core, that being, Ploopy, or Tavik. So, he's still there, so, Tavik has always been one of those guys where I just know at some point he's just going to transition to like a player coach. At some point, it's going to happen. I don't know like when that's actually going to happen, but that would be like just a natural fit. And he's always been kind of one of those players. I mean, he's one of the OGs in the Overwatch scene.
Oh my god! I think if you go back to one of the episodes where we talked about him, I like gush over it, and I feel emotionally attached to him in some way.
Right.
Because I think I spent a lot of time playing against him. So definitely kind of one as I went down the list, there was a moment of like, you know. So yeah, definitely he's one I like.
Yeah, he's another one of those players that's kind of been odd circumstances because he's a great player, but I feel like when you compare him to the field, he kind of treads behind a lot. But yes, he can play like everything at a good level, but I feel like we need... He's not a specialist. And there has been quite a bit of need for that sort of role in the Overwatch League especially. But that being said, you know, on top of that, yes, we had a ton of movement. We had a transfer that had dropped earlier today. This one coming between the Seoul Dynasty and the Florida Mayhem. So we do know that Zephyr has been transferred from the Dynasty to the Florida Mayhem. And I know, like, I've been browsing the Discords of the different, you know, competitive Overwatch podcasts. And, you know, a lot of people are just like, okay. I mean, it's very hard right now to gauge what the picture is for the Florida Mayhem, because right now they have 3 players. This makes 4. They have 2 Korean tanks. They have 2 DPS. So it's really hard to kind of see where exactly they are going to go with this. But I'm just happy that, you know, you have Zephyr, who, for the majority of the inaugural season, was kind of like the backup tank for the Dynasty. So it's another opportunity. And, you know, with the introduction of 2-way players, who knows, maybe this is going to be a player that could be seen some time down in contenders for the Mayhem Academy. And speaking of which, I know Mayhem Academy did sign LH Cloudy, which I'm pretty excited about, one of the great EU main tanks. So I'm excited to see how that's going to play out. But all in all, like, there's some pretty big names that were released. And yes, Misfits, that core roster did struggle mightily, especially the support line. You could argue that they might have been the worst support line in the league last season, and really, they were giving Shanghai a run for their money in that regard. But when I saw Manatin's name on the cut list, I was a bit perplexed by that, because when we look at the amount of consistent play on the Florida Mayhem, there are really only 2 players that I would label as safe. Obviously, Saya Player. You know, Saya Player came in mid-season, kind of took over.
Sure.
He was just unfortunate circumstances being that he was one of the few stand-up players, and one player cannot win, you know, all of the games. And
you don't say.
Yeah, imagine that. In a team game, one player cannot win it all. But Manatin always had a level of consistencies at that off-tank role for the Mayhem. So for him to be kind of out of it, I was like, I felt like Mayhem dropped the ball in that regard, but this is absolutely a player, without question, that is going to find a home, because he has that level of play, and, you know, we've seen him play a lot of Devo. We know he plays a really nasty Roadhog, and, you know, triple tank is still the thing. We still see the old ball and chain with the yoink hook combo with the... You know, Roadhog and Orisa, the pulled pork. So, without question, he'll find a new home, but that one really caught me off guard. And to an extent, like, even Logix, but I know there's a lot of crossover between the hero pools, between Logix and Saya Player. And if you're going to, you know, keep one on the roster, you gotta keep Saya Player in that regard.
No, I hear you. And the Manatin one, you know, Totem, what I think, or what I wonder, is if that was maybe by his request, because maybe he found out that a lot of the other squad was getting chopped, and he had so much history with these players, he really didn't want to start over with like a Korean roster. Maybe they gave him that option, and he was like, no, I'll take my chance on the market, you know? So we don't know that necessarily, but I just kind of think for a player like Manatin, when you see someone of that high caliber, it does get let go, I wonder if there's extenuating circumstances that possibly contributed to that. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, so all you can do is really speculate. But like at least on paper, sometimes there are going to be moves that just don't add up. We don't see what the bigger picture is. We don't know if there were any internal issues or things like that, or maybe with Misfits being really just a shell of its former self, like just having to pick there wasn't enough homey feeling for that team to warrant staying.
And like it's so funny how quick the luster wore off as we really had a lot more faith. Like we didn't have them high in the power rankings, but we had like faith in that roster to develop and build a lot of synergy. And it just seemed like they just lost some bit of momentum early, and they just never could get it back at all.
Right.
There was moments, for all of them, but overall, I think Florida deserves a more competitive team, and so they made a lot of the right calls, but a couple questionable decisions. And Logics will find a team, to your point as well. Easy.
Do you kind of feel like part of that was just due to the fact that the Mayhem did come into that inaugural season with not only the smallest roster, but they also had one of the smallest coaching staffs as well.
They were like bare bonesing it compared to the other teams, so a lot of lessons learned for them and for other new teams that join the league is a lot of they showed us a lot of what not to do, like have your players drive themselves to the arena. Oh my God, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that was a thing. But they did have some pretty sick entrances, even though they kind of became a meme team in that regard. Because that was like, okay, this is the thing that they're good at, and they definitely broke away from that. Because you don't want to be kind of seen in that sort of light, but at least they were having fun with it. But yes, absolutely. Yeah. Florida deserves better. Hopefully we'll get obviously we'll get a completely different looking Mayhem team, but
right.
We just want to see improvements at the end of the day. We want to see all of these teams grow. And obviously, some of these decisions, whether it is doing a complete overhaul or keeping your the majority of your roster intact, obviously, like, this is the first time we're going through the free agency period after a season. So I'm just really curious to see how all of the pieces are going to fall into place. Some teams are going to come out better. Some teams might not even grow at all. Some teams are probably even going to, retract a little bit. So it's going to be some interesting times for sure. But
I will admit I'm having way more fun. Sorry to cut off your segue. I apologize. But I just can't believe how much fun I'm already having in the roster apocalypse. And I feel like we have so much more to go. Even though we haven't even because we haven't got all 6, new, or was it 8 new teams? Oh my God. Oh, I got to get that number wrapped around my head, right?
It's 8.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I've got to get that wrapped because for so long it was 666, and now you're right, it's 8. So goodness gracious, 8 new rosters also joining the mix. So a lot of coaching spots, assistant coaching spot. There's so much left to be written on a lot of these players' stories. So even ones that are getting cut, we don't see playing, who knows where they're going to end up still. It's a lot of fun movement left.
Absolutely. And speaking of movement, there is also some movement for the LA Valiant. And they have dropped 3 players and a coach from their roster. So we have Finzi, Numlocked, and Verbo not returning to the team for Season 2. And then on the coaching side of things, the Valiant have parted ways with their former player turned coach, Grim Reality. So we saw that the Valiant finished last season 27-13. This is a team that had won Stage 4. They finished atop the Pacific Division before getting swept by the eventual champions of the London Spitfire. So, Numlocked had been pretty vocal about being on the bench throughout the season. So really, that's not a surprise. Finzi, we really didn't get to see a whole lot of, but I'm a bit perplexed as to why KSF didn't get the boots. That was a player that was signed, out of contenders, and he didn't really have the biggest splash. We saw him a little bit on the Genji, and projectiles kind of like his go-to, but like I feel like out of everyone on the roster, that would have been the guy I would have cut. I feel like we didn't see enough from him, or really any sort of impact. So that was really like my eyebrow raiser, at least with the cuts. But like Verbo, I can kind of see. But all in all, like this is a team that kept a lot of their core together, because this is a team that did have a fully stacked roster. So really not a lot of movement, just like the Dallas feels. So what were your thoughts on the changes that we saw for this team?
Well, interesting on the KSF one. I just there's not enough tape to really kind of make a case for him. To your point. So interesting on that part. I joke because I think when you were like, no one was pretty vocal, Totem. I mean, he was downright like inflammatory towards the Valiant and his position and what he was brought here to do. He was very unhappy. So I certainly see a comeback for him, and I see him having a place in the league even beyond. I hear he's a great shot caller, a great mind of the game. So I believe we'll see him in a coaching role eventually as well. But Numlock, we'll see him around. So happy, good news for him. For Verbo, the only reason, Totem, I think I'm excited is I believe, if I remember, Verbo's from Toronto. So I think that there may be like a nice marriage opportunity there, that he gets to move back to his hometown, in season 3 and represent Toronto. I think that might be a good move for him. I believe he's more of a bench player, a backup support and or like assistant coach role, possibly. Although now with Lucio coming back, that was kind of his jam back in the day. So maybe we may see a return of Verbo. And again, Toronto would like to see that happen. And then my last thing is, Grim Reality is such a weird story because he was still a strong player, and it seemed like for his own mental reasons, he switched over to a coaching role within the organization, or like an assistant, an analyst role or something, I believe. Totem, if you can correct me. But whatever his title was, but now he makes the weirdest transition to like spectator, so he's going to audience member now. And I find that so strange that he's already just digressed from, player to, coaching, from coaching now to, out and about. So maybe he's really just wasn't finding happiness in anything he was doing, or maybe he just wasn't bringing value to the Valiant in anything he was doing. But either way, nothing else about these. Fenzi is not a super big surprise for me.
Yeah, I believe that Grim Reality was an assistant coach on that lineup.
I thought it was assistant, but like, how like everyone's kind of willy-nilly. These teams are willy with the titles. Some people are analysts, some people are assistant coaches.
You have analysts, you have meme specialists.
Well, I'm not even addressing that as a real thing. You can choose to do so, but
I will.
It's not a real thing.
Oh, it is. Ask Game Watch today, Big Fish. He'll tell you. We talked about it during our interview.
He lives for the memes. Dude.
Absolutely. Don't let your memes be dreams. They can be a reality.
Oh my god. Move on.
Moving on, as you mentioned prior, we do have not 6 but 8 expansion teams, which means that Season 2 will be opening with 20 teams. Man, okay, so we already heard about Atlanta. The Atlanta Airports, your team. Even though they didn't announce it, they're saving the best for last. We have Guangzhou, China. So those franchises were announced last month, and they'll be joined by 6 other teams, 2 of which are from China. We have 2 Canadian teams. So we have Chengdu, China, Hangzhou, China, Paris, France. We have Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and then we have Washington, D.C. for our other U.S. team. So when we look at the ownership groups back in these new teams, we got a pretty good mixture of things. We have the Aquilina Group, who are the owners of the Vancouver Canucks, the NHL team, hockey team. They also own the Rogers Arena. We have Bilibili, who is the leading online entertainment company in China. They do a ton of like streams, things like that, kind of like a YouTube-esque type platform in China. We have DM Esports, which is kind of like a global company that just focuses on esports, entertainment, and investments. We have Huya Inc., which is a live streaming platform in China. So, both of the Chinese investors, kind of in the same realm there. We have Overactive Media, which is the Canadian market esports and video game entertainment. And then we also have Washington Esports Ventures, which is a sports org founded by the Washington Castles of World Team Tennis owner Mark Ein. So all in all, we kind of got, a wide variety of investments. We got, 3 new Asian teams. We got 1 in EU. We have 2 in Canada, 2 in the US. And yeah, I know people are going to be like, well, technically that's for US. People can, label it however. But all in all, we have quite a few Chinese teams. And I think a lot of people were just kind of surprised by that. Yes, there's a lot of money in China. There's a pretty big scene. But when we talk about Overwatch viewership, we always kind of put an asterisk,
right
next to China. Mm-hmm. But it just comes to show, there's a lot of money at play. China is a big market, but it's very hard to kind of see the scale of things. But knowing that there's this much interest in that particular region, regardless of how close Shanghai is to some of these places, I'm glad to see it. But my only question is, okay, we have 3 new Chinese teams. We still have Shanghai. Do you feel like one of these teams is still going to try to keep a national team and try to field a Chinese team, or is it going to be a completely different look? Because Shanghai, they tried to do that, didn't really work out. Even when they made some adjustments mid-season, there were a lot of growing pains, and we saw the end result. Shanghai is completely gutted, only a couple of returning players. What do you think these newer teams are going to do in that sense?
Man, it's tough because I don't know enough about these regions individually, because what would be at stake to answer that question is if one of the regions had a very deep sense of nationalistic pride, mm-hmm. because that'd be the only reason you'd keep with an all Chinese roster. Because if you're trying to win, if you're trying to be up there in the standings, if you're learning from what Shanghai did wrong in season 1, it's avoid nationalism and focus on talent and opportunity. I mean, that is why I say it's tough to answer the question, is because if there's a region in particular that, again, they've got that sense of that we want to field a completely Chinese roster for the sake of doing it, I think they'll do a better job. I remember looking at Shanghai's roster, and we had a lot of head scratchers. We had a lot of people missing mm-hmm. from that Chinese scene. And they certainly did a better job with this World Cup roster that's coming up. So I feel like if they take more of an approach they did with the World Cup roster and really handpick these certain players that show expertise or have certain styles that mesh well together, it can work, because there is a very diverse scene, and maybe they can be more competitive. However, again, Totem, if you just want to win, if you want to be relevant, it looks like we might want to start, taking entire rosters from the Korean scene or from the contender scene and building from that and avoiding this Chinese only perspective. But that's, I don't know.
Yeah, see, for me, I feel like when it comes to doing this, you are kind of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So let's say they're like, okay, we're gonna pick our Chinese team. We're gonna field talent from our region, our respective contenders, teams, whatever. If they do that and they have a similar season to what Shanghai did, I think that's going to hurt Chinese scene more than anything. I feel like there is enough talent in China to field a respectable team, but it's very hard to kind of gauge where some of these regions are in the grander scheme of things. We saw that pop up quite a bit this past weekend with Brazil in the World Cup, which we'll talk about. But if you look at the Chinese region, the best team in the Chinese contenders is Korean. That is Lucky Future Zenith. You do have a couple of standout teams. You have LGD Gaming, you have T1W, Dragons have their academy team, which did okay. You have Lingon Esports. There's some pretty notable names still in that region, but I feel like no matter what China does, I feel like there's going to be a lot of scrutiny and a lot of judgment passed on them no matter what they do. So I don't know what the answer is going to be, but based off of what we have seen, I feel like teams are either going to field like a mostly Korean roster, or they will go for a mixture. And if they go for the mixture route, they need to make sure that communication is at the forefront.
Translators
right?
are on site
We need to have. I don't know if it's just a case of they need to spend more time having English classes, or whatever language, or if they need more than one translator. Whatever the answer is, I don't know, but there were several moments in Season 1 where we saw the disconnect a lot of the time from Shanghai, and that was one of the reasons why their support line struggled mightily, is because they were either out of position, they weren't with their team, or, the tanks just weren't peeling, whatever. Obviously, there was a lot of things that weren't going on with the communication aspect of it, and if you're doing a mixed roster, you need to make sure that you shore that up, because you don't want to run into a similar situation. But that being said, it is a really talented region. I cannot wait to see the Chinese World Cup team, because that is a team that this next World Cup stage is actually
dirty, dude. It is in the mud. They're gonna be playing some.
It is.
brawls.
I'm trying to. It's definitely a slobber knocker. This one
I
out
love
of
that word.
all of them is the biggest wild card aspect,
Definitely.
because you have some pretty notable names, which we'll talk about, and a lot of regions that have upset potential and a lot of scrappiness. So I'm excited about this next one. But all in all, we see a lot of Chinese representation, at least in terms of these franchises. We'll have 20 teams for Season 2. And, there's a lot of talk, a lot of rumors going around, circulating about what the schedule is going to look like. And with 20 teams, you would have to think that the teams are going to play less games overall, but we'll still have more games in the grand scheme of things. So I'm hoping that if the teams are playing less games, we will see less burnout, because we saw the effect that the schedule had in Season 1. This is the time for, the league executives, whoever's in charge, to take a look at it, see the mental strain that a lot of these players are under, and be like, okay, they're not going to be playing 2 games every week. Maybe they'll alternate playing 2-1, 2-1, whatever, or maybe they just play 1 game a week. Either way, I feel like player health throughout Season 2 is going to be a lot healthier than it was in Season 1.
Yeah, definitely. And if you really kind of just trickle down your thought and to say, what does better player health mean for the viewer? It just means more competitive games. It means more fun plays. It means really more entertaining plays of the games and honest sleep darts. Just, sharper players. And I think that everyone wins with that. And we're still getting plenty of matches to watch as viewers, because we're almost doubling the league size. So we're not really losing out a ton as viewers as far as quantity of games, but we are getting also a higher quality of games. We need to be kind of happy with that, I think, and just take this all as good news, as you kind of were saying. So
yeah, and if you have teams that are only playing 1 game a week, that also means that, okay, now when it comes to the coaching side of things, they're not having to split their attention when it comes to preparation.
Right.
So that in itself alone is going to elevate the level of gameplay as well. But speaking of some of the expansion teams, we do not have any roster news per se, but we have heard some of the coaching staff announcements that we have seen. We've gotten news from Toronto. We've gotten news from Washington, D.C. Atlanta has not announced everyone, because, you weren't in there. But we'll get to that.
The NDA's almost up. They can talk about me soon. They can talk. I haven't let them talk about me. I have the NDA on them.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. But anyways, let's start with Toronto. So Toronto were actually the first ones to really announce anything, and we got a pretty big acquisition. When it comes to just traditional sports, I guess would be the best way to put it. So Toronto has the Canadian Olympic Committee CEO, Chris Overholt, having stepped down from that position to join Toronto's Overwatch League expansion franchise. So overall, this is a guy that had served as a vice president and chief marketing officer for the Miami Dolphins, an NFL team, as well as the Florida Panthers, which is Florida's NHL team. And really, like, we don't always see, like, the biggest, like, traditional sports executives jumping ship to esports, but he's going in when the time is hot. Now's the time to get on board. And, we see more and more investors from traditional sports stepping in. Obviously, we've already seen it in Season 1, even more so in Season 2. But we have Toronto. This is a team that is co-founded, like we mentioned earlier, by Overactive Media. And on the other side of that, we also have a returning face to the Overwatch scene in Splice. So, that's a name that hasn't been around for a while. They didn't necessarily have the biggest track record, per se, at the time. But it's always nice to see in esports organization return in after, a lengthy stay. But all in all, like, this is a pretty big sign-in, and we do know who their general manager is going to be, which, also kind of ties into Splice. So we actually have Jason Wan being signed as a GM of Toronto's Overwatch League franchise, and Jason had been with Splice in the past, and after Splice disbanded their team, he stayed with the org. He launched, like, the team's fighting game division before working his way up to become a North American player and partnerships manager. So a familiar face with that organization, still staying in touch with Splice. He has a new role now with this franchise. But, like, I want to kind of get your thoughts on the Olympic Committee CEO for Canada, like, stepping down to pursue esports and the management side of things. Because, like, that's kind of, like, when I saw that, I was like, this is a pretty big deal. This is not an everyday thing that we actually get to see.
Well, okay. Let me start by saying that there was a point here, Totem, which I laugh about my life and, like, the amount of drama and stuff that goes on and things, is that I'm looking at my phone here just like 2 minutes ago because I'm getting texts because my grandmother calls me. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like 80 something. I'm like, probably in trouble, so I text my wife, hey, call my grandmother, and she was attacked by a cat, and she's like, it was my sister's cat, and it got out, and she was trying to get it, but she's good. I'm just laughing, Totem.
Okay.
Just like, God, every day has got to be nuts.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm staying. We're fine. She's got the cat in, but I'm just like laughing. It's like just every Monday is like cursed. So anyway, about the executive, about the Olympic Committee stepping down, I think that, well, I mean, of course, my word of the year, dude, has been validation. I love this concept, but it's validating the reality of the importance of these of people that know what they're doing in these positions, and it's really making it going to be a little bit more of an attractive, competitive space if people like this are the ones that are running some of the other teams. Apart from that, I was trying to think, if I was in this guy's shoes, why would I want to step away from the Olympic Committee, the pinnacle, of Canadian amateur sports and sport?
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, my thing is, I don't know, it's not really a joke or anything. I'm sure there's no joke here. Is that I don't think there's as much red tape in esports. He can really help carve a path or create the way for Canadian esports or for all esports. He could have a vision. He could really want to contribute to the movement, which I think is a much more beautiful idea than, he just was sick of his job and wanted to do something new, because that's probably the case. But I was just thinking it would be sweet. And then just real fast, I just want to comment that I'm glad to see Splice back too. I remember when a lot of these organizations dropped off the map and everyone was just like,
lighting candles.
Overwatch is dead game. This game's over. And we all said, like, these people will be back in some capacity, whether it's they own a team or they're going to get hired to manage a team, and bam. We're seeing a lot of these organizations partner with these larger investment groups to end up managing these teams and really supporting them throughout the whole process. So a lot of money to be made for everybody here, and these orgs are back in the game. So I love to see that.
Yeah. So kind of going back a second. I'll get to the point that I was trying to make after the fact. But when you bring up the fact that we had a lot of teams disbanded, right? That was the time where we were lighting candles and filling out bingo cards, because that was an actual meme that was going around. which was sadly mostly blacked out. But anyways, going back to the Olympics, right? Why do you step down from the Olympic Committee CEO position? Well, you see kind of this trend that is going on, where, for a while, people thought, okay, esports, maybe this is just going to be a fad. Absolutely not. It keeps booming. It keeps prospering. And, there's been kind of like these ongoing discussions, or, trying to get the foot in the door for esports in the Olympics, and they've kind of just been, like, shying away from it, talking about how, like, they don't want to promote, more violent games, things like that. That's a pretty big part of culture right now, and Olympics are just like, yeah, we don't want anything to do with that. So he's jumping ship. He's getting on board with us, and we are going to win this fight. That's what's happening. That's what it is.
I mean, however, I mean, you're you know what? It's like you're looking at it from such the optimist, and really, you're right. I mean, that's really probably more the case. I didn't mean to sound so pessimistic. It may just be, pure numbers at this point. The money's there. It's a business. It's an industry, and it's not going anywhere. So I don't know. It could be simpler than I'm making it, but I certainly want to spice up the story here a little bit.
Absolutely. But shifting gears to the Washington DC team, they too have also announced their general manager, who's done quite a bit of work in the Overwatch scene. So Kate Mitchell will become the GM of the DC Overwatch League team. Really no stranger to the Path to Pro scene, because Kate had worked as the manager of Congarna before moving on to manage a team that we highly regard, especially Edenar and I on Heroes Never Die, our favorite team, the team of Sugar Free, of last night's Leftovers, who is a non-affiliate team. So if you don't watch Contenders, this is a team in North America who were the only non-affiliate team to make it to the Contenders playoffs, and they knocked the Houston Outlaws Academy team, GG Esports Academy, out of Contenders, and they are now having to work their way back in and compete in Contenders trials, and yeah, they nearly beat Team Envy as well. They were so close. But this is the only non-affiliate team that's been able to take it to an actual academy team, which is a very big deal in the Path to Pro scene. But anyways, Kate is going to serve as the assistant GM, of Washington Esports Venture, but she is the lead of managing the team's Overwatch League franchise. So this is someone with a storied background in Overwatch, good signing overall, and I just love LNL, so anytime I see LNL pop up in any sort of sign-in or movement, I'm happy to see it, and Kate definitely deserves it.
Yeah, certainly. Interested to see now what the philosophy is of the roster and kind of where this goes now. But, absolutely going to be someone who obviously has talent, has shown ability to have success regardless of the set or setting. So very much looking forward to seeing how things pan out for Kate, and should be a fun ride this next season. Like I said, I keep going back to it, but I just can't wait to see how a lot of these teams make the decisions to build their rosters, and then how they manage them, once the season, too much totem. I got to slow down one step at a time. But you know what? Overall, happy for Kate.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe we'll kind of see some similar things happen. Like, a team winning a stage and then deciding to drop their head coach for whatever reason. Which did happen to the next person that we're going to talk about, who has been announced as the head coach for Toronto's franchise. So Toronto is going to look to a familiar face to the Overwatch League scene, and they have signed Bishop to be the team's first head coach. So when you look at Bishop, his coaching tenure includes coaching Kondu Panthera, head coach Cloud9, who, eventually became the London Spitfire. And London, he won Stage 1 of the Overwatch League. Bishop was at the helm, and then I believe it was his contract expiring back in March, and that was the reason that they had parted ways. But, London would go on to win the first season, and, there's a lot of stuff that happened in between, and we've talked about that at length. But it's important to note, Bishop has not been he hasn't really been doing anything coaching-wise since his departure from the Overwatch League after Stage 1. So Toronto will actually be the first time that he's, joined a coaching spot since that departure from London. But this is a guy that is bringing experience in coaching for not only Korean teams, but North American teams as well. And that even includes, mixed rosters. So you would have to think, like, with that in mind, this definitely opens up a lot of different ways that Toronto can look at building their roster for Season 2. Now, that being said, you and I are pretty big followers of one team in particular. And you and I are both hoping that this team is going to get signed. They kind of won contenders after a very long journey of coming in second place, and that was broken, that being Runaway. Is there hope that they're Toronto bound, knowing that, we have an experienced Korean coach? Or is this all just a pipe dream? Because I hope it's not.
Never give up and trust your instincts. I do have to say that is a match made in heaven. That is the ideal situation. Is it a pipe dream? Yes. Do I think it's going to happen? Yes. Does that make me irrational? Probably. Is that going to be really difficult to not cheer for Toronto if that happens next year? Yes. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think that is a perfect match made in heaven. I really don't know why you just brought this up, because I never really sorted it out that way. And as you were saying it, like, people on stream saw it, but I was starting to like put it together, and I get way too excited. Yeah, man, I'm thinking that might be some serious competition with that team as soon as they hit the ground running in Season 2. If that was the case, again, I think that's a reach for that all to come through. But if you think about it, it's possible. It's possible.
It would take a lot of money.
But I'm just saying, and what I mean is possible is they would be competitive the moment Season 2 would start. That's what I think is possible.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're looking to get your foot in the door and just kick it wide open, that is a way to make a statement, just right out of the gate. So who knows? There's hope. And another team that I'm pretty excited about is the Atlanta Airports. That's not really their name. That's the meme name. They'll come up with something better, but who knows? That's all I've heard about Atlanta. Maybe Andres will let me know what Atlanta's known for outside of their airport, because that's all Edinar knows. So that's my knowledge too.
I go there quite a bit, and they're known for their traffic. So
Okay.
I was thinking the Atlanta Horns.
Okay.
And then they're known for their aquarium there. They have a very beautiful aquarium. So the Atlanta Aquariums, or the Aquatics, or the Aquanauts. Okay, these are all amazing. These are all gold totem. Write these down.
Okay.
No, that's all I've got really. No, they've got there's a lot of peaches and peach tree, or every street is peach tree there. Or you turn right on peach tree, left on peach tree, then go straight on peach tree. So they could be peach trees. What do you think, bud?
Well, if
no one says Georgia Peaches, so that's like very unique name, I think.
So their mascot would have to be Widow then. I mean, that's kind of going full circle. I mean,
I'm not mad at it. Not mad at it, sir. Love it.
yeah, okay. Moving on. Well, speaking of Atlanta, right? Okay, so Atlanta, they've made a lot of announcements in regards to their coaching staff, which dropped earlier today. We do not know who is going to serve as the general manager, but we got some pretty familiar names on this list. So we have Sefi serving as the team's head coach, with Silence serving as the assistant coach. I'm probably going to butcher this name. I'm just going to say it how it looks. You have Kasors will be the team's player development coach. You have Danny, who will be the team analyst. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Danny is going to be like the youngest Overwatch League staff member.
Is he?
Yeah.
See how old is he?
I'm trying to remember. I'll have to browse it. I know he's really young.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure he was a pretty prominent member in Wawas at some point when we were doing some side casting stuff.
That sounds right, actually. That sounds right.
And we have Donman, who will serve as the team's translator. So, Sefi, Silence. going back to last night's leftovers, those two were coaching LNL. And Seffi, of course, formerly served as the head coach for the San Francisco Shock at the start of the season. Obviously, things didn't pan out. Shock were having to play the waiting game for, quite a bit of time for, two players. But he also coached Selfless back when Selfless was all of the rage those days. And Kasors and Danny both had stints in Contenders EU. And, they've had some pretty good track records with their respective teams as well. But I'd say, when I look at this lineup across the board, I like what I'm seeing so far. But really, it's going to come down to the Brandon. They got to take one of our ideas and really run with it. And then 100% we're behind it. But I'm excited for this team. It is a local team for some of our community members. And, I might still be a little bit bitter that, the closest team to me is Toronto.
It's nuts if you think about it.
It is literally nuts. But this is a great team. LNL's coaching staff was amazing, and I'm hoping that they are going to, elevate this new franchise above what people might expect for, just a newer person within the scene, or a new team, per se.
I will just, not really have a ton to add here. I think you really checked all the major boxes. Success is success. I think you see that a lot where amateur coaches go to pro scene and college coaches go to pro because they show success. And that's once you show success at one level, the next test is at the next level, and so it's a logical progression for these guys, and a great opportunity for them. And again, I'm you notice that a lot of the staff has not had a lot of Korean influence. So this team in particular, we want to watch to see if they really go all in on a Korean roster and how some of those communication issues may evolve, or if they try to build something a little bit more a la carte, if you will.
Right.
But again, I'm just really excited to see what these guys can do. No matter what roster they end up choosing, they will be competitive. I think they're no matter what with this type of coaching staff, I believe that whatever roster they have, they'll be a middle of the pack team with the worst roster you can think of. And they'll be very competitive with some decent to good players. So excited for them.
Well, knowing that, since this coaching staff is from LNL, do you feel like that increases the chances that LNL will be the academy team for Atlanta?
I mean, in more or less words, I feel like certain players from LNL will be heavily looked at and tried out a lot. And maybe not the entire roster's Control-C, Control-V over, but I think certainly it would make sense that because of the connection, that some of the core may end up transferring over. Again, it's tough to say who, because I feel like LNL is a squad as a whole, not necessarily a ton of individual standout players. So that's kind of tougher to do that, but I would be happy with that at the same time, because it's still synergy. And that's always something that I think if you're trying to start fast, season 2's coming. That's not a bad idea.
All I will say is whichever affiliate team or whoever picks up Sugar Free, I will blindly follow. And I'm sure Edinar will say the same thing on Heroes Never Die on Wednesday.
You guys are fanboys, tell you what.
Yeah. There's a reason why Sugar Free is a prodigy. That's all I'm saying. But, he's too young to play in the Overwatch League, so, Academy teams hit him up, please. Because, he definitely deserves it. But moving on.
Wait. I should call you guys fanmen. Fanmen. All right, moving on.
Okay, moving on to our main discussion for this week. We got to look back at the latest Overwatch World Cup group stage. That, of course, being the Los Angeles group stage. So, we had 3 days of action. We got, 2 more group stages coming up for, the next 2 weekends. But Slambo, what went down on Friday in regards to the World Cup?
Well, Totem, on Friday, September 7th, Canada, in the first match of the day, defeated Austria 4-0. Then Norway defeated Switzerland 3-1. Canada, then again, continuing their sweep, they took down Brazil 4-0. Then it was the United States' chance to step up, and they defeated Austria 4-0 as well. So not a good day for Austria. And then Brazil and Norway scrapped it out. Brazil took it 3-2.
Yeah, that was a very close series. But like,
that was the only close series of the day.
Well, like, I feel like
close maps. I know.
Canada Brazil was a lot closer than what that map score actually reads.
That's okay. That's fair.
Out of that lot anyway. But moving on to Saturday, September 8th, we saw Austria start off the day by defeating Switzerland 3-2. We saw the United States defeat Brazil 3-1. Canada defeated Norway 4-0. The United States defeated Switzerland 4-0, and then Brazil defeated Austria 3-1, which would lead into the final day of action. So, Slambo, what went down then?
As we capped things off, the big day came, and it was scheduled perfectly, if you might add, because we started off with Norway defeating Austria 3-1. Canada defeated Switzerland with a nice warm-up game 4-0. United States defeated Norway in their warm-up game 4-0. I'm so mean. Brazil defeated Switzerland 3-1, and then we got to the coup de grace, if you will, Totem.
Mm-hmm.
The United States versus Canada, and United States, as I humbly mentioned at the top of the show, they defeated Canada 3-1. USA. All right.
Absolutely. So, what I loved about this was, like, when the United States dropped a map, like, you saw a lot of the players, a lot of the coaches from Team Canada being like, imagine losing the map. And then, of course, you browse the Discords, you browse Twitter, and everyone for the United States that was tweeting about it was like, it's not gonna matter. Like, USA is still gonna beat Canada, get that top spot, and sure enough, that happened. But I just loved the exchanges when we look at that US-Canada match, when it came to the coaches, because you have Arrow, the head coach for the Dallas Fuel, and then you have Jane, who is also on the coaching staff of the Dallas Fuel. It was, but like...
It was cool.
We really don't get to see that aspect of it in most situations, so all in all, yes, the United States versus Canada was definitely the biggest match of the week. That one determined who would be the top seed out of that group stage and who would be the second seed, and who would potentially be unfortunate and at some point draw South Korea. But United States not having to deal with that. Doa's not going to set us up and draw that lottery ball or whatever the heck it was last year. And we're not gonna have a snafu where a graphic designer posts like a graphic early, and then we do a redraw for no reason, even though it wasn't announced. It was one thing after another. But we saw how it played out. But regardless, U.S. versus Korea, that was the real finals last year, and that'll be the real finals again this year.
That's what I said.
When
I
our
said
paths
that at the top
cross.
of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
But that being said, Sambo, I know you were kind of like in and out throughout the weekend, but were there any like standout matches in particular that you feel like, if people did miss him, they should go back and check out the VODs for?
It was one that I didn't even have like in my mind or that I thought of, but I want to go back to one that you mentioned. And when I did kind of rip on Canada versus Brazil, that was a bit more of a competitive match than I'm giving it credence. So that one was definitely one worth watching. The other one for me, it was, Brazil versus the United States. I mean, they were able to take a map off the U.S., which is kind of exciting. It's just kind of like the underdogs be able to take a map off. I mean, it was Junkertown. It was kind of in the garbage time of the 4 games, if you will. You know what I mean? Like, it still counts. Everything matters. I guess I shouldn't discount it. But it was Junkertown. And I don't know. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the individual players on Team USA. But that one was definitely fun. And then... some of it's tough, Totem, because I kind of lamented to you before the show that it's like when some of the lesser teams are playing the lesser teams, like anybody can make these crazy plays and they look so good. So these matches look closer and more flashy, but it's like as soon as you put one of those teams against like US or Canada, it felt like it wasn't even close. It felt like they were moving in slow motion. So it's tough to get really pumped up about some of these lesser exciting games. I hate to admit that, but that's kind of why I was juggling a lot of it was NFL kickoff Sunday, so I was juggling that with day 3 of the World Cup. So anyway, overall, I think you'll probably have a better sense of some more to pitch, but those are the two that I would focus on.
Yeah, for me, like, I really enjoyed the Brazil versus Norway from day one. That was a very close one. That was, like, kind of like the decider of, okay, who's going to be, like, the challenger between these two? Because Norway was kind of... I mean, both of these teams would be considered to be, or were the dark horse picks out of this group stage. You know, Brazil has been, okay, so Brazil represented by Brazil Gaming House. For the most part, they did have a couple of other, I think it was Black Dragons Esports, members, but a lot of them were like substitutes. But BGH is the most dominant South American team, bar none. They enter a tournament, they win said tournament. That's how good they are. And they're in a region where there's really like maybe 2 really good teams compared to like the rest of the field, so it's very hard to gauge where exactly they are as a team. And I am hoping, they look at relocating so they can grow more, because Brazil is like, the World Cup for Brazil is like really their only chance to get that sort of exposure. And in order for them to bring their game to that next level, they need to compete in the US or in Europe, or maybe even Korea, but that might be a death knell. I think US would probably be their best bet overall. But there were some pretty good things that we saw from Brazil. Norway had a ton of contenders talent. They had some pretty flashy stuff throughout the weekend. I did enjoy Switzerland versus Austria, which was, 2 of the lesser teams overall, but I felt like both teams really had an opportunity to shine, and that one was basically just like, okay, we're just going to try anything and everything and see what works, and there was a lot of unpredictability in that series in particular. But of course, like, you mentioned US-Brazil, I really enjoyed that series, but the marquee one was definitely the main event, the last one of the weekend, as expected. The one that we definitely had the most investment in, which the majority of us would have anyway, because that would be the one to decide who was the top dog. And sure enough, USA stood tall overall.
USA.
But the World Cup is a great opportunity for players to get noticed. This is where Mickey got noticed. He got noticed in the World Cup. He eventually got signed by Envy, who would become the Dallas Fuel. He's still with the Dallas Fuel. So, with that being said, Slambo, there's a lot of talent out there. There are a lot of standout players from quite a few teams out there, but who to you this past weekend stood out amongst the crowd?
Well, I mean, maybe call it a soft spot for tank players, because I feel like tank players kind of get the raw end of the deal sometimes. It's just kind of like the offensive and defensive line of the NFL. Sometimes you're not focusing on how flashy it is, but it's kind of the core part of the movement on the map is, your main tanks. But Watt 7 was definitely a player that stood out to me. He was on Austria, and just kind of really consistent main tank plays, some misplays on Kings Row on Reinhardt, if I remember, some silly mistakes at time to time, but he's not, the highest tier player. But just really showed up a few times, made some really fun, aggressive plays on Winston that stood out to me. I like that style. And then Neil from Brazil. I think Neil from Brazil is, again, another kind of a unique style Brazil gaming house, but he works really well with that Brazilian style. Certainly that aggression really works against some of the lesser teams like Austria and Switzerland in particular. And then, you know what? I'll round it out with my third tank is Decod. Definitely a player, from LNL, aforementioned team, but a player that I've seen in this scene for years. Never really has been on a lot of the tier 1 teams, but been bouncing around for a long time. A storied history within the Overwatch scene. And so someone that I enjoyed seeing still out there competing and out there, and again, I kind of hope he ends up on a nice Overwatch League roster. And again, this is a good platform for him to show his stuff. So yeah, those are mine. I'll go all tank, Totem.
All tanks. I like it. But for me, like, if there was... Okay, I'm gonna go the support route real quick. If I was to give an MVP award... First, I wouldn't say, like, this was my absolute top standout player, because I'm a little bit biased, and Space was by far the best player across the field on any team, statistically speaking. But Crimzo on Canada, part of Team Envy, if he does not make the main roster this year, I'm going to be absolutely livid, because Crimzo was tearing it up. How many times were you looking at the kill feed and Crimzo would just start fragging out, getting a 3k, or he'd position himself where he wouldn't be affected by the EMP, and he would come in and save Canada with a Transcendence.
That happened on Rialto. That was
happened
like at the end of that, which won that map.
Right.
Almost won that map or won that fight. That was a crazy play. And then real quick on Crimzo, and he would win a couple of the 1v1s against the DPS. That would be someone like he'd be Zenyatta, and he would like win against the Tracer or Genji just a few times. And I'm like, that's what you need out of that support player is some self-peel. You don't want to rely on that all the time, but Unko is another player that reminded me of someone who was very good at that back in the day. Not as much lately, but I love that type of support play.
Absolutely, and we know Dallas released Chips Hygiene. Crimzo is a natural fit to their needs, and he was definitely the standout for me. Note also came in pretty big for Canada. He was kind of like their clutch player in a sense, because there were quite a few occasions in these matches where Note would just land a really sick self-destruct, which allowed, Canada enough time to get the reinforcements to the objective. But kind of like looking across the field, when we look at Norway, Oniga, that was someone that I'd hyped up going in. He definitely delivered. More so, I feel like, on Tracer, on Widow. IPN looked pretty good, also, from Norway. Sinatra, I don't know where the hell Sinatra has been, but...
He's been practicing heroes.
The USA tank line, as expected. I mean, obviously, we had Muma and Space as our 1-2 combo, but Sinatra came in. We saw him on Wrecking Ball. We saw him on Reinhardt. What? He was, on all sorts of stuff. So, I was happy to see that come in, because it's just, we've seen, some of the, we got to see, the triple tank dive setup with the, the Wrecking Ball, the Winston and the Tifa, and then, we had dive tanks with Reinhardt, which is, you never see that. So, I love the creativity from that aspect. But they both showed up big, but I really enjoyed, I like watching Brazil game in house, so I'm a little bit biased in a sense, but Honorato played really good on the diva role. Liko actually finished with the most eliminations throughout the 3 days, who's their DPS player, but Olamau, their Lucio player, this is a player that absolutely deserves an opportunity. Because when I look at him on the Lucio, he does a really good job using the wall ride to, escape things. But, I feel like his sound barrier placements, when it comes to different levels, is just... It's so different compared to what we normally see. Because there were times where, he would, jump on top of a box to drop it. So there was, a smaller distance to actually hit it on the ground, which I thought was pretty interesting. But, there were time and time again where, I don't know what the stats are, but, it seemed like out of all the Lucio players, he was getting more barriers out across
you find it
the grand scheme of
ironic,
things.
Totem, that the player that you most enjoy watching Lucio on, a Brazilian Overwatch hero, is a Brazilian player? Do you find that to be odd?
Sure.
I'm just kidding, but I just found that to be ironic. But it's a good point that he maybe has mastered some nuances because of his, connect. Anyway, just a weird thought. But anyway, that's a really good point. I didn't really notice that as much, but you're right. That's a really good call out.
Yeah, and the other player, if we're talking about consistency on Widowmaker, is it Lux or Lux? I can't remember. Lux from Switzerland was hitting shot after shot on Widowmaker, and he was one of the standout Widowmaker players, so I loved watching Switzerland play. Granted, they didn't always look the best, but there were several times where he would land headshot after headshot after headshot, which is always nice to see. because, it really helps things pop. So a lot of standout players, a lot of great players across the field. But for me, Space was the MVP this past weekend. Stat-wise, he was just on another level. He rarely died throughout really the entire group stage, which was really no surprise because that's what kind of like what Space does. But I love seeing the tactics of the United States that they brought. They had fun with it. People can call it BM, with the attack Torb and Bastion, or the Symmetra Bastion strats, whatever. The thing is, it's like we saw so many different looks from the United States team, so it really shows the flexibility of this team. So,
I thought Totem really funny on that is it's like they're sabotaging their film of themselves. It's actually a smart play. So when teams go back to like watch what they do on certain maps, and they've got like Attack Torb and Bastion, and they're like, well, we can't really use this as footage to study because they're not going to do this. And it's actually kind of a smart smart play not to show all your cards right now. And just if you don't have to pick certain things, keep it simple. Don't show your strats. Don't show what you're comfy with, and experiment, which is probably why you're seeing a lot of those weird compositions in the triple tank and the Reinhardt with it. That's probably a little bit of time to experiment now too. But they were doing some of that in the Canada game, so that experimenting turned into their game plan. So
yeah, to an extent, it's just like, what, we're just gonna style on you, and that's what they were doing. I mean, it seems like as soon as they knew they had the beat on you, right? Like that's when they would do it more and more.
Yeah, I think so. So,
but yeah,
God, but and Space is just Space. Like, what did you expect? I mean, when we saw that on the World Cup roster, we were like 2 thumbs up. We were all in on that.
Yeah, definitely the best Western player in my mind, without question at this point.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say.
All right. Well, speaking of, USA, we had the marquee match. We had USA versus Canada in a 4-map set. We opened up on Oasis, and, of course, Control started everything off. So US came out round 1, run into 303. As we mentioned, Sinatra was on Reinhardt. They ran it with the Winston and Diva. You had Muma on Winston, Space on Diva, like it was for the majority of the time. And Sinatra just, he opens up with a charge kill on Bonnie. Canada are just shoved all the way back to spawn. And Note being the clutch Diva that he is, he lands a 3k with the Graviton self-destruct combo, which allows Canada to flip the point at 38%. But, Sinatra goes full aggro. Note's actually the first one to fall in that next fight. USA flip it back at 29%. And we see Canada, they invest their tank ultimates. They don't get any kills out of it. And, eventually they just get chased all the way to their spawn. But we see time and time again, like, Team USA, they were really smart when it came to their aggression. Because there were times where they would legit run you all the way back to spawn. But there were times where, like, they knew when to pull the reins back. They weren't overextending and getting punished often. Like, I mean, it happened a few times, but it wasn't a case of not knowing when to get out when the going was good.
Which is, like, arguably one of the most important pieces of, like, Overwatch. It's just kind of that rubber band of when it's time to just stop going forward because it's about to snap, and when you can really stretch that thing to its limit, so that you're right. That's an important thing to observe, especially this early on in the World Cup stage.
Absolutely. So round 2 was, you can't get any closer. It's 199. You kind of expect that from Control. It's either 100-0 or 199. There's very few in between, even though the numbers would say otherwise. But, it's Control. So Muma dives Bonnie early, and USA is there to find the follow-up kills to open the round by gaining control of the first point. And Hydration, he ends up getting caught by a headshot from Surefour, and Surefour is just popping off in round 2. We see USA still having presence on the point, and they maintain that off the back of the coalescence from Raucus. And Crimzo basically is forced to use his Transcendence near the spawn. USA was pushing forward, and has to do it just to keep Canada alive. But space is eventually opened up by XQC, who popped Primal Rage, and Canada flips the point at 99%. So we see Hydration going for the EMP on top of the Canadian supports. And what happens? Surefour's right there on McCree, lands a flashbang, see ya, he's gone. And Hydration was very tentative at that point. He was looking for the support line, but Surefour was always right there, just babysitting, because he knew that was the plan. A lot of the times we see the Sombras coming in, with the perma stealth, looking to get the hack on, the Zenyatta in most instances. But here he was looking for both because he had EMP up. But anyways, Canada ends up gaining control of the high ground, and XQC ends up keeping it alive for Canada, and he just knocks USA away, which allows Bonnie to get the Resurrect off, and Canada's just there to find the cleanup, and that one ends 100-99. But we got to see quite a bit of Sombra in this World Cup stage, and that hasn't really changed. We've seen a lot of more diversity in regards to the support duos that we're seeing. We're not always seeing, Mercy, Zenyatta like it was. We're seeing a lot of Ana. We're seeing a lot of triple tank. We saw a good mixture of tanks as well, because, we saw various looks in regards to the 303 GOATS comp.
Right.
But were you surprised at all to see the McCree pick when it comes to dealing with the Sombra, or do you like that approach? Because a lot of the time, at least in the past, when it came to dealing with Sombra, now granted this was different variations, but, we either saw McCree or kind of Reapers, kind of like babysitting the health packs when it came to, the hacks, but, it's kind of the similar approach when it comes to protecting the support line from, either the, just a normal hack or the EMP whenever it's up.
Yeah, I do like the McCree pick, and I like the person playing it. And it kind of, as you're going to talk about in this match, there's an ebb and flow to Surefour's, picks and efficiency on those picks. But I do like the McCree pick there, in particular, if it's well enough timed and the supports are able to maybe turn a little bit and assist in the DPS. One flashbang is enough to burn down that Sombra during that stun duration before she can complete her translocator leap. So just for me anyway, I like what McCree allows there. You're not always going to get it off. In fact, usually what you see is McCree stun too early, too late. Too early, so she's able to get the translocator off, or too late is that she's already gone by the time the flashbang would have landed. Or what happens is that, that he lands the flashbang, doesn't have enough damage to finish himself, and the supports do not assist it with anything on their side. And so she gets away, but at least, to that point, you're still peeling for your supports. So even if you don't kill the Sombra every time, you're disrupting her ability to empty a full clip into Zenyatta or Ana's head, which is really what you're looking to do. And then on a side note, I loved Surefour's justification. And it wasn't just Surefour. We saw a lot of Sombra, but just the idea of being able to take a tank out of the game pretty much for 4 to 6 seconds. That's something that I believe that's why we're starting to see that more, is just the power of no defense matrix or no leap for Winston. It's really the difference in finishing off the kills or finishing off a pick there, or punishing a dive. So, for a number of reasons, I get the Sombra, but I also, to answer your question, I get the McCree and I like it.
Yeah, so round 3 brought some interesting compositions. Canada actually opted to run, solo tank. So, they had XQC on Winston. They ran 2 DPS, and they paired, kind of a self-efficient healing DPS. You had Soldier 76, you had Reaper. They actually got an open-in pick on Sinatra, which allowed Canada to get that first control. So we see some changes coming out from the United States team. They move Hydration over to the Pharah. Muma ends up diving the support line, which allows US to retake the point at 47%. Hydration starts to turn up the aggression here and gets a 2k, which prompts a switch from Surefour, who would go over to the McCree. And, US again, they find both supports, and Canada aren't able to touch the point. But when it comes to Canada, yes, we know Surefour is a great hit scan player. Canada opted to run a lot of Sombra compositions. The problem is, their best hit scan player was also their Sombra player, so it kind of pigeonholed them into running certain comps with that. So I definitely felt like that had a pretty big impact on what they could and could not play in regards to dealing with the looks that the United States team were giving them.
I think that's a good point, and that's kind of one of the limitations of some of these World Cup rosters is you don't have as much depth and hero pool possibly, and it's also a little bit more cumbersome to make some changes. So I don't know. That's an interesting point. I didn't really think of that. Is that Surefour, definitely was doing well on the hit scan, but also it's kind of limiting what your team is doing strategy wise. So that's I think that really, you saying that kind of leads into the deeper implications of the rest of the match here.
Absolutely. So moving on to map number 2, we went to King's Row. Canada on the attack first, so Surefour finds an opening hack onto space, trying to take, the carry tank, taking him out of the fight, not allowing him to peel or really do anything. Not allowing him to defense matrix here. XQC ends up diving on top of Raucus, which eliminates him out of the fight. But he ends up dying in the process. Now, what I found interesting about this approach was XQC a lot of the times was diving and he was trading, in a sense. He'd dive in, get a kill, but he would die in the process, which you don't want to be losing your main tank. And that was kind of like an ongoing thing that happened throughout the series. But yeah, you can do what you got to do, and I'll keep moving on. But anyways.
No, I'm gonna wait till after King's Row. Okay. I'm gonna take my bathroom break. Once we get to the map I don't want to talk about. So anyway.
The one that we didn't win.
Right. That's actually not why. But anyway, go ahead.
But anyways, on this... Okay, Canada ends up getting presence on a point. They secure the first tick. Muma ends up diving the backline, finds Bonnie, and Canada are sent backtracking after the Primal Rage Meteor Strike combo comes out. Sinatra ends up finding both the supports on his own in the backline, gets a follow-up kill on Note with the Doom Fist, and we see Space coming up over top, gets a 2k with the Self-Destruct, and, Surefour, he's looking to, land that EMP. The EMP comes out, Agilities, draws a Dragon Blade, but USA is able to turn it around off their aggression, and, Canada are looking to backcap, so USA kind of overextends, they get the kills, they're able to get back to the point. Yes, they gave up, 2 ticks, but Muma closes out, gets the Nano Boost, pops the Primal Rage, and USA hang on to get the full hold. So, King's Row, staple of competitive Overwatch, full hold, not a guaranteed win, but King's Row, when we, statistically speaking, is probably, when it comes to completion, one of the more completed maps in Overwatch. Not so much Rialto.
No. Right. But I gotta tell you, the feeling you have as a team when the stakes are that high, and you weren't able to push, it just, I don't know. It just feels bad. Like there's a certain sense of like, wow, we weren't able to really, because to your point, it's the litmus test for teamwork. And so that first point is very achievable with just the smallest amount of teamwork and synergy at times, especially in the settings me and you play in, right? But so it's definitely probably a tough psychological hill they're climbing at that point in the match.
All right, so knowing this, USA, they're on the attack. They need to... I can't remember the exact percentage. They basically just needed... it wasn't a full... I'll say it was a full hold, but they needed at least 2 ticks. But anyway, USA comes out on the attack. They opt to run goats. US has Sinatra on the Reinhardt, so USA are basically just looking to knock Canada off of the high ground that they're positioned in. I think Canada's defense was running, the Orisa, they had Junkrat, the Widowmaker. So Muma dives up top, but he isn't able to escape. Crimzo is there, he just eliminates him, starts fragging out. Agilities ends up finding both of the supports with a 2k Riptire. And then this is where Crimzo does what Crimzo does, as I mentioned. Just, gets a casual 3k, like, it's no big deal. Just taking over. And then Sinatra, we see some changes. He moves over to the Wrecking Ball. Hydration is over on the Sombra. We see Muma Primal Rage, which forces out the Transcendence, and Sinatra guns down too, and Canada is just basically just trying to throw themselves on the point, but they're met with a minefield from Sinatra, which basically just blocks the passage, so they can't really approach, and USA, they go into halftime with the 2-0 lead, which would lead us to the map that you don't want to be around here
real
for,
quick,
and that was Temple of Anubis.
I want to add one thing real fast for Kings Row, and I think the Kings Row came down to when Canada was on defense, that Surefour just did not get like any value out of any EMP. And that is pretty much the difference in the team fights that mattered for them. And I think that it just really, there was a theme for me throughout the day that things just really relied on Surefour. And so again, let me hop forward real fast because I'm going to step away for just a moment here and spoil Temple of Anubis for you. But Hydration was invisible, and Surefour played a really good Sombra on defense, a.k.a. This is why Totem will explain why U.S. was not able to win this map. But anyway, sorry to spoil all the fun. I'll be right back.
All right, so as I mentioned, map 3 went to Temple of Anubis. Canada on the attack first. So U.S. are running the triple dive tank on the defense. They have Sombra as their sole DPS. We see Agility is getting caught out, and he's the first to fall as Muma ends up diving both of the Canadian supports. We see Muma receiving the nano boost, and Canada just gets zapped down, which results in the team kill. We see Surefour coming in with the EMP on the back line, and XQC is there with the 2K. They're just able to, clear the point. They have 5 minutes left on the clock, so pretty good time bank overall. But the Primal Rage comes out from XQC, and the US just gets split off at this point. Really not a whole lot to do when you're split in two, and USA just fall one after another, and it was a quick attack. Canada makes quick work of point B. They get it on their first approach, and end up having 4 minutes and 10 seconds left in the time bank. So, Temple of Anubis, known extensively for going to extra rounds, going to extra attacks with the time bank. That did not happen in this match because Canada did hang on with their defense. So going to the US attack, we saw the USA looking to run straight dive. Canada ends up doing a really good job at collapsing on their backline to protect them, which really kept them, kind of at the forefront on their defense on that first point. And the USA was very split on their first engages here. They're often forced to regroup. Surefour ends up dropping an EMP, and Canada finds 3 eliminations off of it, so USA, they're sent packing again. But eventually, they have all their ultimates at the ready, all 6, for that next engage. Sinatra gets nano boosted, but Canada does a great job at disengaging. So Sinatra, he draws a blade, which forces out the Transcendence from Crimzo, but he ends up falling immediately. They had the Brigitte there, the Shield Bash came in, the Whip Shot. That's all she wrote at that point. We see Muma dive into the high ground, but he gets slept by Bonnie, and Canada ends up taking another fight, but Space comes in, hits a massive self-destruct, which results in a 3K, which was in overtime, which allows USA to capture the first point, and then XQC, he gets on the wrong end of the USA aggression, he's the first to fall, and Hydration on the Doomfist at this point doesn't find anything with the Meteor Strike. Surefour ends up finding Moth in the backline, but USA, they walk away on that first engage with 1 tick. So they got something out of it. Agilities ends up insta-giving Ruckus, and USA forces it back out. We see the EMP self-destruct combo coming out from Canada, which results in a 2K for Note. So USA sent packing again, not looking too good, and eventually, we're in the final hour again, only 10 seconds left on the clock, and USA lose both of their supports. Hydration is able to force the overtime, but he's the only one alive for Team USA at that point, and he falls, which allows Canada to take their 1 map out of the series overall. So all in all, map number 3, the Sombra play was a difference maker. Canada did a great job at peeling for their support line, and that really kept USA at bay, but there were too many times with the approach with the US attack where they were just split off. It was just not clean execution in that map in particular, and that was basically the death knell in regards to that specific map.
I will just add on real fast that it was just apparent there that like from the very beginning, hydration was on Genji, or Sinatra was on Genji, and things just felt off for that DPS duo at the very beginning of that map. And then you cut to the end of it where hydration is on Doomfist, and I mean, just could not get anything going on that attack on the second point on point B. It was just so out of character for hydration, but it just felt like that just wasn't going to be their map. So anyway, if the US DPS plays a little bit more tight to the tanks, a little bit more refined, I think that's a closer map. And it was 2 CP, like anything can happen. So, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, you either attack 20 times or you get full health. Who knows at this point?
What's the problem? What are you surprised about? It's 2 CP.
Yep, that's just the game mode in a nutshell. But to close out the series, we went to Rialto, which we actually got to see quite a bit of Rialto.
It was
this
like
group
the longest map of my life, it felt like, possibly. But I don't know. Maybe
but on a positive note, we completed it.
We did. It was grueling. And
Yes.
There was moments that you didn't think it was going to happen. But we completed it. And okay, I'll save that for no. Yeah, you keep going for us. We'll save that. I'll save that little note.
All right.
That note.
Assuming note didn't come in the clutch. But anyway, USA were on the attack first. So Canada, they are holding their defense pretty far back. XQC is actually the first one to fall. So again, lose your main tank first. Never a great thing to happen. He comes in, ends up getting a nano boost, and he ends up finding Moth in the backline. He dives back to the cart, takes down Muma. So pretty good sequence there for him. Muma, he comes in, gets shut down with a Discord orb, and Moth is not able to escape from the cold grasp of agilities and his shurikens. But anyways, the Nano Blade comes out, finds both the supports, and, Hydration looks a barrage only to get hacked by Surefour. That is a Field's bad pen. Getting grounded by a Sombra, Asphera, or Mercy, just... It's one of the worst feelings.
It's over before you even finish the hack. As soon as you hear the hack sound appear, it's just like, no. You just know it's over.
Right. Ugh. Yeah, and it's free falling, and then you're just embraced by death at that point. But anyways, Muma ends up getting hacked, and falls, but, Space is there. He answers back, gets a redemption kill with the self-destruct over on XQC. But Canada is looking to bring it back with the EMP. And, Raucus actually moves to the Soldier 76. We're getting low on time. He ends up finding a huge Helix rocket onto Surefour, which allows USA to get that first objective in overtime. Something that was a common theme in this map. But anyways... Bonnie ends up getting punted into the water from Muma's Primal Rage. Hydration comes in with the EMP on the back line. Space ends up removing Bonnie with the self-destruct. And the Canada tank line, they're doing a good job at contesting on the back line. So, they're right on the payload, trying to deal with the supports. So, we're not really seeing a ton of progress with the payload at that point. But we do see Sinatra finding an open and pick on agilities. We see the EMP getting infested by Team USA. And Canada just gets mowed down. And again, we get the second point in overtime. And then this is where Team USA, they turn up the aggression with their tank line. We see them pushing inside. Agilities gets locked down with a hack. Moth ends up getting hacked by Surefour. But, USA... They only had one person on a point, and that was Moth, and Surefour's back there contesting. So again, there were a couple of times on their attack where we weren't seeing the payload move in, and that definitely could have bit them in the ass. But we pulled it out in the end. Muma ends up finding all three supports, and XQC on top of that with the Primal Rage and the jumps. A lot of jump pack kills, which is great to see. And USA complete the map in overtime, and Muma. Definite standout in this map, ends up getting 10 final blows on the attack. Great to see. Always get to have the more dominant main tank in this bout. Absolutely. But moving on to Canada's attack, we see them struggle early against Hydration's Farah. Agilities ends up drawing a blade, which ends up catching Hydration in the sky. He does find a follow-up
kill. Which, mind you, it was just like, it's always like the dream of the Genji to get that kill, and it hurts so bad when you go for that dash and try to get that Farah, and don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
But Agilities did a great job of securing that one kill. I know he's at that moment stood out to me. So
Absolutely. But USA support line they fall, which allows Canada to get that first checkpoint. They did a much quicker time than USA did. Ruckus ends up getting second pretty late here, so Canada gets a lot of free push off of this. But USA, they come in, they find a support line, but Agilities answers right back with a meteor strike on our support line. Space ends up getting nano boosted as a baby diva, which I don't. It's hard to tell if that was on accident, but you know. Diva,
I think it was, but who knew?
like
Space
we
would've
seen
called
like
for it,
some
they're gonna
strange
do it.
things. I mean,
Yeah,
Beba Diva can do a lot of damage, but we know how important being in your mech is. It might have just been an instance where, okay, we want to make sure Space gets back in the mech so he can, you know, pull more ultimates into the void of the defense matrix, because he was doing pretty good work throughout the entire weekend, blocking ultimates. But anyways. We end up seeing Muma being the first to fall after he gets hacked, and US are starting to unravel a bit as Canada reaches the second objective. Again, a lot of that was just off the repush. And, you know, Crimzo, this is what I brought up earlier, you know, he has a position in where he's not getting hit with the EMP that came out from the US. And, you know, he keeps Canada alive. He comes in with the Transcendence, keeps him up. Muma ends up getting slept immediately, gets taken out of the fight, and this is where Hydration comes in, drops EMP, and USA win the fight, not having to invest any other ultimate. So, you know, they're looking good here. They have more ults at the ready. Muma ends up diving on top of the Zenyatta, which forces out to Transcendence. Note is the first to fall for Canada. And Muma ends up getting slept, but, you know, he gets booped up. XQC gets dropped and time runs out. So USA, they take it 3-1 to win the series. They come out on top of the group stage overall with a perfect 5-0 record. And sure, they dropped a couple of maps, but we beat Canada. We got the top spot.
Total, more importantly, the only thing I need to add to your excellent commentary on the match, the only thing I want to point out was that sweet moment where a slept primal raged XQC got diva bombed.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, did that feel like justice.
That's a pretty
That's a
rude,
repeat. We've seen
that
before. Yeah.
It's also in a sense kind of a rude awakening. Although technically at that point he's not really awakening because like he was in slumber and then he's just.
But there's like a moment
demise.
where he transitions from dead, asleep, to awake to dead. You know, there's a moment. So
yeah, like maybe like a nanosecond.
It counts, Totem.
But anyways, you know, a great weekend. We have another big weekend coming up. A weekend that I'm excited about, and we're not going to go too heavily into this, but we do have the Bangkok group stage coming up. So we have China, Australia, Sweden, Thailand, Spain, and Denmark. So with that in mind, like, I want to know who you think is going to advance to BlizzCon, and is there anyone in particular that you think we should spotlight going into this upcoming weekend?
You know, Totem, I just thought of a really good nickname for this qualifier. We're gonna call this the Bangkok Sausage Factory because this is where the sausage gets made. Mm-hmm. No one wants to see how the sausage gets made. You know that? You know what I'm saying, bud? Is that this is going to be some grinding going on in this. That's pretty good. All right. It's pretty sweet. All right. I did okay. For how tired I am, I lined that up pretty well. I mean, for me, I think me and you will agree almost every year we're extremely interested in Australia.
Yes.
It's a team we really enjoy watching. I'm really excited to see China. We talked about that earlier at the top of the show because they chose a different methodology for the World Cup this year. And I really want to see how this region performs. Obviously, Sweden, scary. Denmark can be scary, could be. But I think Spain could be scary. We're looking at Denmark with ability. If they don't do well, it's going to be a lot of Defran question people being like, why was not, because Defran got kind of snubbed, if I remember correctly, for Denmark. And then, of course, Mickey and Thailand, you never know. He brings that positivity, my friend. you never know what that again. That's why it's the grinders, man. All of them stand out.
I was just gonna note, like, the Franslane was like he was the favorite for the community lead, not to actually like play.
Is that what it was? Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry. You're right. Forgive me because you're once that community lead just chose the roster. So okay. Well, then to my point though, if people were still kind of up in arms that DeFran wasn't the community lead, so we're gonna see if the person that was in charge did a good job. Right? It's on them. Okay, there we go. I recovered.
All right, so man, like there are 3 teams in this, and I'm like, okay, these are the best bets. So you have China, Australia, Sweden. I honestly have no damn idea which 2 is going to advance. I think Sweden is the safest bet, but between China and Australia, it's kind of a toss-up because these are 2 sides that, both scenes are still what I would consider to be like in development. They're kind of in their own bubble. So it's very hard to kind of gauge where they are. That being said, like, I like China's roster. Australia's, I like it, but I would have preferred if they kept more of Sydney Drop Bears in it. I mean, they've only been the best team in Australia, winning back-to-back contenders. That's been kind of the same case in a couple other regions. But all in all, I think China will be the other team to make it. It'll be China, Sweden, but this is going to be close. 100%.
You'll be, hey man, if you've ever seen the inside of a sausage, all the components are very close.
It's very compact.
I'm just keeping this all going. I'm sorry.
Yes, but if you're looking at players to watch, I got a couple for you. Team Thailand, Cyajin God, absolutely awesome diva. Now that being said, Mickey is also on this team. I'm assuming Mickey, Brigitte. Like, we're gonna see a ton of 303. Mickey will be on Brigitte. Cyajin God will be on diva. Awesome player to watch. Australia, they have probably the best diva in contenders in Punk. That is a name to keep an eye out for. He was one of the many highlights in Contenders Australia for the playoffs. They also have a Kraken from Sydney Drop Bears. He's a great support player. Crystal is the standout DPS player on China. If you want to talk about young talent, Sweden has Sharp on the DPS role. And I'm a big Sharp fan. Awesome Tracer player. Another one of the young prodigies. That's going to be a pretty big name all in all. But all in all, like...
a lot to look at. A lot to call out, right?
I'm personally hoping Australia makes it, but it's very hard to feel confident in this group stage.
I mean, I'm not cheering for anyone in particular. I'm just really excited to see the wild card that comes out of this because, again, they're going to come out of this a stronger team and really with nothing to lose. And really have proved a lot if they make it out of this arena. But Sweden, for sure. That second team, it'll be between Australia and China. But, I would love to see a wild card pop up and be in the mix at the end.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, guys, I know we're running pretty long, so let's close it out. If you want to help us out, the best way to do that is to leave us a positive review over on iTunes. We're always looking for ways to improve, so please let us know. We also have Overwatch Recall. That is our listing of, Overwatch content, whether it's Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, Esports, General Overwatch, whatever. Every Sunday, I release episodic listings where you can find all the latest podcast episodes. Of course, you can find that on our website at owlnshow.com/weekly recall. And I got an interview coming up with a podcast that you may be familiar with because it has been one that you were on in the past. That being the Cavalry, that'll be my next interview. So that episode will be released probably next Monday. So stay tuned on that. But Slambo, why don't you go ahead and let our viewers and our listeners know where they can find us over on the social media.
Totem, I'd be so happy to do that for you. If you want to send us an email, send that over to contact@owlnshow.com, or our Twitter and our Instagram is @owlnshow. Our website is www.owlnshow.com with all the aforementioned links that Totem was just talking about. Our YouTube channel is official. We got an
Woo! Yes.
official link. This feels nice. YouTube.com/C/Overwatch League Network. Thank you guys so much for all those of you who helped out to reach that illustrious 100 subscribers. Our Discord is at discord.me/OWLN show. And twitch.tv/OWLN show is where is where you can find us live on our Twitch page. Obviously, it's inherent in the URL. Reminder that our show, the one that you're listening to now, is live Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Heroes Never Die. It's a variety Overwatch show that is at Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then our host streams, usually Spider and Totem, kind of tag team Fridays and Saturdays between 7:30 p.m. is generally when that kicks off. So keep your eye on that for those bonus streams. Other than that, I guess I'll just go ahead and let you know that you can find me on Twitter at SlamboVerwatch or twitch.tv/Slambo. And Totem, what about you?
Well, you can find me over on Twitter at TimelyDrunkCTR. And, you know, there's Spider, too. He's not here. I think he's, like, taking your position in the Abyss just, like, as a fill-in.
Honestly, it's better that one of us is in the Abyss or the Abyss will swallow us all. We have to make a sacrifice every once in a while.
But you can find Spider on Twitter at SpiderGD, and if he's live here. Same with me. But anyways, guys, that'll do it for us here tonight. Again, this has been Overwatch League Network, episode 49. I am Totally Drunk, joined by my soulmate, Slambo, and we will see you guys back, hopefully on Wednesday, for Heroes Never Die. But we hope you have a good night, and we will see you next time. Later.
Thank you for listening to the Overwatch League Network. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at OWLN Show. The theme music for OWLN is the main theme and victory theme guitar remix by Michael Mack.